Let's talk about what has been done so far and what is the potential as far as food processing in India is concerned. Vinita Hariharan, I'd like to bring you in.
Yeah, thank you, Frank, for having me over. So, as Ajay just mentioned, he put it in, for the understanding of the layman, what is food processing actually about, the value addition that we do to the basic agriculture produce. So, which is like a sunrise industry in India today, and it's rising very rapidly, almost a 10% growth rate annually. And it's the fifth largest industry in terms of production, consumption, exports, and potential growth. So statistics are very encouraging as far as the food processing industry is concerned, and is considered the sunrise industry in India. So after agriculture, like one of the value addition industry, I would say, is the food processing sector, which is still untapped to a large extent in India. We've realized the value of it lately only. Unfortunately, although countries like Germany and all of these so-called advanced economies have realized the value much earlier, and therefore they went into value addition and food processing in a big way, back a few decades back itself. So, but we realized the merit of it lately, and we've been doing a lot of work in food processing, especially the government also giving a lot of incentives, these infrastructure incentives, infrastructure pushes, and subsidies for infrastructure across the value chain in the food processing industry. And we have big ticket programs, being run by the Ministry of Food Processing, like the Sampada, which is then about the food parks. They give subsidy to various industries to set up food parks in various parts of the country. And apart from mega capital investment subsidy promotion by the government, they also they've introduced a scheme called the Pradhan Mantri formalization of micro enterprises, which I was a part of the formulation of that program. So that is about actually formalizing a large percentage of the food processing industry is actually informal. Just like the MSME sector, almost 90% are micro enterprises, and a lot of them are outside the formal network. So the endeavor of this present day government is also to formalize a lot of our activities, starting from the DBT and starting from the digital platforms. It's all about formalizing and also the labor reforms. It is all about bringing the informal sector into the formal sector, so that a lot of this, untapped potential, and which is not actually calculated in the GDP, which comes into the fray now. So therefore, the food processing industry was also similarly out of the chain largely, because a lot of small enterprises, small businesses, even the retail vendors, which are outside the network of the the calculation of our GDP per se. So now all that is being brought into the fray, and one of the schemes that promotes that is the Pradhan Mantri formalization of micro enterprises, which is about taking on a pilot scale about 200,000 micro enterprises. They're looking at actually improving their infrastructure, improving their value addition, improving the infrastructure across the value chain, and also providing subsidies to self-help groups that promote food products in the ODOP category. ODOP is one district, one product. So whichever self-help group actually takes up the production of that particular product of that particular district, that self-help group is given a lot of incentives in terms of working capital and in terms of the raw material subsidy, etc. So there's a lot of these initiatives that are being done by the government. And of course, the production linked incentive scheme also worked a big way in promoting the food processing sector over the last couple of years. So that's so much that the government is doing. And the private sector, of course, has been doing its bit in terms of being enterprising in this whole industry. But this is a huge industry for enterprises to come in and start their businesses. So this is a huge potential here in India, especially since agriculture is so robust today. So therefore, the food processing sector offers a whole lot of promises for new enterprises, and for the young entrepreneur who wants to start up a business, this is supposed to be one of the really promising sectors where there's a lot of ROI here, because it could be small scale, it could be also large scale. So it could be small scale retail food processing units, or it could be little larger scale, like for example pineapple processing, wherein you have to have machinery for cutting and for processing and for drying and all of that. So for that, again, the government is giving subsidies for the infrastructures, not only subsidies in food processing, but the subsidies also come from the MSME ministry, where from the PMEGP program, where they give subsidy for the machinery, for buying the machinery, procuring the machinery. So therefore, the food processing industry, I would say, is promising. The lot of challenges that are being faced by the sector, especially in terms of the infrastructure, that needs to be provided across the value chain, because it's not an easy industry. You need to have high standards of production, and quality standards are also high if you want to be in the export bracket. So therefore, it requires a lot of hand holding. It requires a lot of support from the private sector, as well as from the larger industry players, as well as from the government. And government is doing its bit, but there'll be much more that the government can do in the coming few years, because this is going to be an industry that's going to be really forward looking.
Absolutely. We can replicate as far as the other sectors are concerned, agricultural produce and etc., to ensure that we have a robust food processing sector.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the role of cooperatives is increasingly going to find a place going forward, especially with the amendments in the Act with the multi-state cooperatives coming in. And so I think there's going to be a growth in the cooperative sector. And the Amul model, of course, is the model which everybody, it's a case study replicated across, to be replicated across and studied globally as well. So, but then, of course, it's one-off. Amul is a case study in itself, and we cannot have so many more Amuls, but definitely we could have Amul-like cooperatives, not only in the milk and dairy sector, but I think across the food processing sector, the role of cooperatives will get strengthened going forward. And I think that's going to be the focus. That should be rather the focus of state governments as well, to promote the cooperatives in their state. For example, Kerala, rather successful model of cooperatives across various sectors. And they're not just focusing on food. They have, finance cooperatives, housing cooperatives, but food especially will have a huge, in the sense there's a huge synergy with the cooperative movement and the food processing sector. So there's a huge potential there, as you pointed out, Frank. So yeah, therefore the cooperative model is something that has to be replicated and has to be promoted in the food processing sector.
Very true. With Harian, let me bring you in now. How do we achieve our full potential really as far as food processing is concerned? Because the upside is huge, and we need to ensure that we tap into this upside right now before it is too late.
Yeah, absolutely. So like the statistics are there for us to see, is we hardly are skimming the surface as far as food processing potential is concerned. Is just about 4 to 5% of the total output. So we still have a long way to go, and it's really promising. It's a promising sector in terms of the employment potential, in terms of the the kind of potential for enterprise, and across the value chain, the kind of ripple effect that it could have on the economy. So I think it's all about consolidating the various models. So we have various dispersed kind of models. We have a very successful large scale model like Amul. Then we have a lot of small scale entrepreneurs spread across the country. Wherever raw material is available, that's where the food processing sector in that particular region is thriving. So I think we need to spread it across through usage of various models like the FPOs, which are coming up very well in our country, then the cooperative model. So we need to consolidate all of these promising models that are doing well, and I think look at a holistic picture and see how we can spread it across India, because every district, I believe, in India would have a potential for food processing. So I think it's about tapping the raw material in the first place. If you look across the value chain, first of all, tapping the raw material, then allowing the raw material there to thrive. In terms that will be again agricultural input. So the Ministry of Agriculture or the agriculture sector is also involved in the food processing. It's not an isolation. So I think the more the agriculture sector thrives, the better the food processing sector would also have chances for doing well. So right from the raw material sourcing, honing the raw material in the various districts in India, then looking at the logistics, in transportation of these raw materials to wherever we need to be, it needs to be processed. So I think logistic infrastructure also comes in play where we need to strengthen the logistics sector. And then we look at the food processing sector itself, looking at consolidating the various enterprises, looking at promoting various more enterprises, and how we could actually handhold them in terms of technologies. For probably we could invite the export oriented units and the units outside and look at technology transfer from outside for improvement of technology infusion into the various food processing sectors. And that's another thing. Training in quality and certification, I think that's another area which we need to go a long way in India in terms of meeting the standards for the exports. The FSSAI, of course, is doing its bit. We are strengthening the FSSAI, but there is still a lot of scope for further strengthening of the FSSAI network and the way the quality and standard certifications are being given. So there's a lot of role for multilateral agencies also to come into play and provide the necessary hand-holding right up to the last enterprise in the food processing sector. Then we go to the distribution. The distribution is also an important part where we need to also look at our distributor chains and look at the distributors who are in place and look at how we can incentivize them further to promote the food processing sector per se. So across the value chain, there's a scope for a lot of improvement, and there's a lot of scope for a lot of hand-holding, and there's a lot of scope for the government as well as for the large industries to play its role in supporting the smaller businesses in the food processing sector.
Very true. All right. And Vinita Hariharan, close the show for us with your concluding remark.
Yeah, so I think it's time to consolidate, further strengthen across value chain, and also scale up and spread the food processing sector across the country through following the very successful ODOP model is what I would say the recommended way forward.
All right. On that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of the Discourse. Thank you to my guests for joining me on the program.
Thank you.